When I was 17, my world narrowed into a single word my parents loved to throw at me: independent. They said it like it was a gift, like it was wisdom passed down through the ages. But the truth was, it was a blade sharpened by their disappointment in me. I remember sitting in the kitchen, the walls yellowed by years of cooking oil, my textbooks spread out in front of me. I had been waiting for them to say something encouraging about my college applications, waiting for a sign that they believed in me. But instead, my father closed the newspaper, my mother folded her arms, and they looked at me as though I had asked them for the moon. "You will not go to college," my father said flatly, as if the decision had already been carved into stone. "You will graduate high school, get a job, and start contributing to this house. That is independence. That is what you owe us." And my mother, always quick to twist the knife, added, "We might pay for Julia, but not you. You should be grateful we raised you at all." Julia, my younger sister by 6 years, their golden child. She was the one they saw as beautiful, capable, destined for medicine like the generations before her. Me, I was just the defective older daughter, the one who never shone bright enough to catch their pride. That night, I went back to my room and cried into my pillow until my face ached. But then I reached for my tape recorder. I had started keeping it hidden in my dresser, recording the things they said when the cruelty became too sharp to bear. Maybe it was a way of reminding myself I wasn't crazy, that their words were as harsh as I remembered. I pressed the red button and whispered into the tape. "They told me I don't deserve college. They told me I will never be more than a burden." Those recordings became my lifeline, proof that the little voice inside me, the one screaming, "This is not normal," was telling the truth. After high school, I did what they demanded on the surface. I worked part-time jobs, waiting tables, stocking shelves, clerking at a gas station. But quietly, I began building another life. I rented a small apartment in secret, using a distant cousin as my guarantor. I underreported my earnings, so my parents couldn't demand more money from me. And slowly, carefully, I began saving. For 3 years I lived in that limbo, still tied to them, still enduring their mockery, but carving out pieces of freedom wherever I could. Julia, meanwhile, thrived in their eyes. She talked about becoming a doctor, about taking over the family clinic. My parents fawned over her, bragged about her grades, gave her everything I was denied. And then 9 years passed. I had long since left them behind, built a life that was mine alone. I graduated from college, yes, college, the very thing they swore I'd never reach. I had built a company, a career, and a family of my own. I married Philip, a kind man who studied medicine, and together we raised our son, R. I thought I had put my parents' cruelty behind me, filed it away in the cabinets of memory where old wounds go to fade. But life has a way of bringing ghosts back to the table. It was at a wedding of all places. Philip's acquaintance was getting married in a first-class hotel, the kind of venue that glittered with chandeliers and marble floors. While Philip chatted with colleagues, I excused myself to the restroom. On the way back, I heard voices. "Oh, look at that defective item. Why is she here?" At first, I thought they couldn't be talking about me. I was 30 years old, dressed in a carefully chosen gown, my hair pinned back neatly. I was no longer the awkward teenager they once scorned. But then I heard it again, sharper this time. "Wait, you ugly thing, you can hear me, can't you?" I froze, my pulse quickening. And then a hand clamped down on my arm. I turned, and there she was, Julia, my sister. Her face was twisted in mock outrage, as though I had wronged her merely by existing in the same place. And behind her, our mother, her lips curled in disdain. Sister Julia spat the word like poison. "Did you sneak in here? Did you think you belonged at an event like this?" I stared at them, my throat tight. It had been nearly a decade since I had cut them from my life, yet in that moment it felt like no time had passed at all. The same contempt, the same cruelty. My mother's eyes raked over me as if I were dirt on her shoes. A man approached, Daniel, Julia's fiancé. He looked confused, startled by the confrontation. "What's going on?" he asked. And then Philip appeared, my anchor. He slipped beside me, his hand warm at my back, and for the first time in minutes, I could breathe again. "Hazel," he said softly, "there you are." Julia's expression faltered when she saw him, but then her glare returned, sharper than before. She turned to Daniel, her voice rising. "This woman is nothing but a disgrace. We cut ties with her years ago. She's a parasite who only graduated high school. She doesn't belong here. Her words sliced through the air, each one designed to wound. My parents chimed in their chorus rehearsed. Yes, she's our eldest daughter, but she's an embarrassment. We did our best to hide it. We kicked her out 9 years ago. She should be grateful we even let her finish high school. I stood there, their voices crashing against me like waves, but this time I didn't crumble. Because I wasn't that 17-year-old girl anymore. I was a woman who had built something they couldn't take from me. Family, I said quietly, almost to myself. No. A real family doesn't strip you naked in the cold for a mistake. A real family doesn't burn your textbooks or laugh while giving your sister designer clothes and tossing you rags from the dumpster. A real family doesn't tell you you'll never be more than defective. Silence rippled through the crowd. Daniel's face paled. Guests stared. Julia sputtered, her confidence cracking. And Philip, steady as ever, slid his arm around me. Hazel, he murmured, shall we go? I nodded. Because for me the confrontation was done. I had nothing left to prove to them. But fate wasn't done with me, not yet. The ballroom felt suddenly colder, though the chandeliers still blazed with golden light. Guests shifted uncomfortably, forks paused mid-air, whispers rippled through the crowd like the rustle of dry leaves in a storm. I stood there, my breath uneven, my heart pounding against my ribs. Julia's face contorted red with fury, her voice cutting through the murmurs. You dare talk back to me, in front of my fiancé, in front of everyone. Her hand trembled not from fear, but from rage. You don't deserve to even stand here. You were always beneath me, beneath all of us. You think a pretty dress and a decent husband make you someone? You're nothing, Hazel. Nothing. My mother's sharp voice followed, perfectly timed, like she had rehearsed this humiliation for years. We told you to stay gone. We gave you a chance to disappear quietly. And yet, here you are dragging shame back into our family. What will people think when they know our eldest daughter is a failure? That we had to cut her off because she couldn't handle independence? Her words hit harder than I expected. After all these years, even after building my own life, some part of me still craved her approval, still wanted her to look at me with pride instead of disgust. And hearing her reduce me once again to nothing, it burned. But then Philip's hand pressed gently against my back, grounding me. And I remembered who I was now. Not the teenager begging for tuition money, not the daughter crying into a pillow while my sister tried on new dresses, bought with the money that should have been mine. No. I was the woman who had scraped and clawed her way into independence, who had built something lasting without their help. I took a slow breath. You're right about one thing, I said softly, my voice carrying despite the quiet. I don't belong here. Not because I'm beneath you, but because I outgrew you. Julia's eyes widened, fury flashing, but before she could snap back, Daniel stepped closer. His brows were furrowed, his voice low and uncertain. Julia, what is she talking about? What does she mean you burned her textbooks, that you cut her off? Julia stiffened. She's lying, she always lies. But my words had cracked something open, and the weight of years pressed against me until I couldn't hold it back anymore. My voice rose stronger now, trembling with pain and truth. When I was 17, I begged them for help with college. I begged Daniel. I had the grades, the recommendations, the drive. But my parents told me I wasn't worth the investment. They said I should be independent, that Julia deserved their support more because she was smarter, prettier, more promising. So they gave her everything, every dollar, every ounce of encouragement, and left me to rot. The crowd gasped, the words sinking in like stones thrown into a still pond. I worked nights, studied days, and lived out of a tiny apartment they never knew about. I paid for community college myself, one credit at a time, while Julia got her tuition fully funded. They laughed when I told them I wanted more, told me I was defective, a disappointment. And yet, my voice wavered but steadied again. I made it. Without them. Despite them. Julia's hands clenched into fists. Shut up. You don't get to stand here and play victim when you abandoned us. I turned to her fully, then my gaze locking with hers. I didn't abandon anyone. I was abandoned. I was discarded so you could shine brighter. You got designer clothes while I wore rags. You got your textbooks paid for while mine were torn and burned. And you know what? I kept the proof. Every cruel word, every dismissal, I recorded them. Do you want me to play them now, Julia? Should we let your fiancé hear what you and our parents really thought of me? Her face drained of color. the smug mask cracked panic flickering in her eyes. Daniel looked between us, his jaw tight, suspicion dawning. "Is that true?" he demanded. Julia stammered. "Of course not. She's making things up to ruin my wedding." But her voice was drowned out by the whispers swelling around us, guests exchanging glances. Phones subtly raised to capture the scene. The image of Julia the golden child was crumbling before everyone's eyes. My mother tried to salvage control, her tone sharp as broken glass. "Hazel, stop this nonsense. You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said, my voice steady now. "I'm embarrassing you. Because you built your reputation on lies, on pretending we were a perfect family while you crushed me into silence. But I won't be silent anymore." The room went still. For a moment, the only sound was the faint clink of silverware abandoned on porcelain plates. Philip touched my arm. "Hazel," he whispered gently, "you don't have to do this here." But I shook my head. "This is exactly where it needs to happen. In front of everyone. Because that's how they hurt me publicly, shamelessly. And now for once the truth gets to live in the light." Julia's voice cracked, desperate now. "You don't get to ruin me, not today." I met her gaze, unflinching. "You ruined yourself the moment you thought stepping on me would make you taller." Daniel's face was pale. His lips pressed into a thin line. He turned to Julia, his voice low but sharp. "We'll talk later." Then he stepped away from her, the space between them as loud as any accusation. The shock in her eyes nearly undid me. For a fleeting second, I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who clung to me during thunderstorms, who braided my hair and whispered secrets. But that girl had grown into someone else, someone who used cruelty as armor. And I couldn't save her from that. The weight of the room pressed down on me, and I realized I had said enough. I turned to Philip, who had been my steady anchor through it all. "Let's go," I said softly. As we walked out, I could feel eyes following me, whispers chasing me down the hall. But for once I didn't feel shame in their gaze. I felt free. And yet even as I stepped into the cold night air, the echoes of my parents' voices followed me. Their betrayal wasn't just a moment in my past, it was a wound that still bled even now. I knew this wasn't over. The truth had cracked the surface, but beneath it lay deeper secrets, long buried, waiting to rise. The night air outside the hotel clung to my skin, sharp and cold, like it wanted to remind me that freedom often comes at a cost. Philip's arm was steady around me, but inside I was trembling. Not from fear, at least not entirely. It was the weight of release, the aftershock of speaking truths I had held in for so long. We walked across the marble foyer to the valet stand, my heels clicking against the floor. Guests filtered in and out, some stealing glances at me with wide eyes, others whispering behind manicured hands. I pretended not to notice, but each look carried a sting. People would talk, of course they would. They always did. But for once, their words weren't knives aimed at my back. They were simply echoes of a storm I had unleashed. In the car, Philip drove in silence for a while, his hand resting lightly over mine. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft. "You did what you needed to do." I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold and white. "It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like bleeding." He squeezed my hand gently. "Sometimes bleeding is what it takes to let poison out." I didn't answer, but his words stayed with me, simmering in the quiet. That night, when we returned home, I found myself unable to sleep. The confrontation kept replaying in my mind, the look on Julia's face, my mother's disdain, my father's silence. But worse than that were the memories it dragged back with it. Memories I had buried so deep I thought they had rotted away. I remembered the day they burned my textbooks. I was 16, clutching my geometry book to my chest, refusing to hand it over. "Why should we waste money on you?" my father had barked. "You'll never be anything more than a cashier." My mother had plucked the book from my hands and tossed it into the fireplace, the pages curling black as I screamed. Julia laughed that day, a cruel little laugh that still echoed in my ears. I remembered the times they called me defective. Not just once, not just in anger, but as a nickname, like it was part of my identity. Defective Hazel, broken Hazel. They said it so often I almost started believing it. I remembered recording those moments in secret, whispering into my hidden tape recorder, begging the universe to prove I wasn't crazy. "It happened," I would say into the red light. "They said it. I'm not making this up." The next morning, I dug out the shoebox where I still kept those old tapes. They were dusty, the labels faded, but they were real. I slid one into a battered player, and the hiss of static filled the room. Then my own teenage voice, fragile but steady. They told me I don't deserve to go to college. They told me I'll never be anything. They said Julia deserves it all because she's better. They said I'm defective. The sound of my mother's voice followed sharp and cold even through the crackling tape. Stop wasting your time, Hazel. You'll never be more than average. I turned the player off, my stomach churning. Even after all these years, the words still pierced me. Philip found me sitting on the floor, the shoebox open in front of me. He knelt down, his eyes soft as they fell on the tapes. You kept them. I nodded. I needed proof. For myself. For anyone who would ever doubt me. He touched my cheek gently. You don't need to prove anything anymore. Not to me. Not to anyone. But I wasn't so sure. Because even if I didn't need to prove it, a part of me wanted to. A part of me wanted Julia, my parents, the world to hear those tapes and know I wasn't lying, that the cruelty I described wasn't an exaggeration. Later that day, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The words were short, blunt. You ruined her wedding. I hope you're proud of yourself. I didn't need to ask who sent it. It was my mother. Another message came moments later. If you think anyone will side with you, you're wrong. You're still the same pathetic child we cast out. Julia will always be the daughter we love. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. For a moment, I almost believed her. That old voice rose inside me, whispering, maybe you are still defective, maybe nothing's changed. But then I thought of my son, R. I thought of the way he looked at me, with trust, with love, with none of the judgment I had endured. I thought of the life Philip and I had built together, brick by brick, without my parents' help. And I realized I couldn't let their poison infect me anymore. I didn't reply. I blocked the number. Still, the silence that followed was suffocating. My parents had cut me off years ago, but now it felt like a final severing, as if they had chosen Julia as their only daughter and erased me completely. The grief of that choice was sharp, almost unbearable. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. My father's. The words inside were cold, deliberate, like each sentence had been crafted to wound. Hazel, you made a fool of yourself. You embarrassed us all. Whatever life you think you've built is meaningless without family. And you no longer have a family. Julia is our only daughter now. Consider this your final notice. You are nothing to us. I read the words once, twice, 3 times, until the ink blurred with my tears. Then I folded the letter and slid it into the shoebox with the tapes. Proof. That's all it was now, proof of who they really were. But proof doesn't heal wounds. Proof doesn't erase the ache of longing for a family that never truly existed. That night, I stood in my son's room watching him sleep. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, his small hands curled into fists. I thought about the promises I had made to him when he was born, that I would never let him feel unwanted, that I would never strip him of his dreams the way mine had been torn from me. And for the first time in days, my heart steadied. Because maybe I couldn't rewrite the past. Maybe I couldn't change the cruelty my parents had chosen. But I could build something different. I could be the kind of mother I had needed. I could make sure my son never wondered if he was enough. And that, I realized, was the truest revenge of all. The days after my father's letter were heavy with silence. Every corner of my house felt like it echoed with words I hadn't asked for but had received anyway. You are nothing to us. Those 6 words repeated in my head like a curse, tainting the quiet hours of the night when I should have been sleeping, when Philip's breathing beside me should have been enough to anchor me. But instead, I found myself drawn again and again to that shoebox. I would open it, run my fingers over the brittle cassette tapes, and remember every whisper I had once recorded. Proof. My insurance policy. My curse. Philip watched me with quiet concern. Hazel, he said one evening, keeping those tapes is one thing, but living inside them is another. What are you going to do with them? I looked at him, the question heavy in the air. For years, I had carried those tapes like a shield, proof that the cruelty I endured wasn't just in my imagination. But now, after the confrontation at Julia's wedding, after the letter that declared me erased, I wondered, was silence still protecting me? Or was it protecting them? That thought followed me into my dreams, haunting me. And then one night I dreamed I was 17 again, standing in front of the fireplace watching my textbooks burn. Except this time I wasn't helpless. This time I held the shoebox in my arms, and I threw it into the fire. The flames roared, the tapes hissed and cracked, and in the dream I felt lighter. But when I woke, I knew it wasn't that simple. Burning the past didn't erase what happened, and it didn't give me peace. The decision came weeks later in the most unexpected way. I was at a networking dinner for Philip's hospital when I overheard two women talking about Julia. "Isn't she the one whose sister caused that scene at the wedding?" one whispered. I heard the older sister was unstable jealous. The old ache pulsed in my chest, but instead of shrinking from it, something inside me hardened. That was the story spreading now, that I was unstable, jealous, defective. The same story my parents had always wanted the world to believe. And I realized if I didn't speak, if I didn't claim my truth, their lies would keep winning. So I made a choice. The next day I called a journalist. Not a tabloid writer hungry for gossip, but an investigative reporter who specialized in stories about family estrangement and hidden abuse. I didn't want spectacle, I wanted truth. We met in a quiet cafe, and I brought the shoebox. She listened carefully as I explained everything, from the night my parents refused to fund my college to the burning of my textbooks to the tapes themselves. When I pressed play on one recording, the reporter's eyes widened. On the tape, my mother's voice was unmistakable. "Julia deserves our money. Hazel will never amount to anything. She's defective. Stop dreaming about college, Hazel, it's not for you." The journalist leaned back slowly. "Hazel, this is devastating. Are you sure you want this public?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, because they've already made me public. They told their story first. This is mine." 2 weeks later, the article went live. It was longer than I expected, a detailed narrative of my life, the rejection, the cruelty, the recordings. My voice threaded through every paragraph, interspersed with the raw words of my parents captured on tape. The fallout was immediate. Julia's perfect image cracked. Patients at the family clinic whispered about the doctor who mocked her own sister's dreams. Neighbors who once believed my parents' polished stories now avoided them in the grocery store. And Daniel, the fiancé who had looked at Julia with suspicion that night, broke off their engagement. The first call came from my mother. I didn't answer. Then my father. I didn't answer. Then finally Julia herself. Against my better judgment, I picked up. Her voice was venom. "You ruined my life." "No," I said quietly. "I told the truth. You ruined it when you built your life on my silence." "You'll regret this," she spat. "You think you've won. You've destroyed our family name. You've destroyed everything." "I destroyed nothing," I said firmly. "I just stopped letting you destroy me." And I hung up. The days that followed were strange. People reached out, old classmates, co-workers, even distant relatives. Some offering sympathy, others admitting they had always suspected something was wrong. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. My story was out there, raw and undeniable. But with visibility came backlash too. There were those who said I should have kept quiet, that family matters belonged behind closed doors. There were whispers that I was vindictive, ungrateful. And yet none of it mattered because the weight that had crushed me for decades was gone. Then one evening, as I tucked R into bed, he looked at me with wide, innocent eyes and asked, "Mommy, why don't we see Grandma and Grandpa?" The question pierced me deeper than any insult ever could. How could I explain betrayal to a child? How could I tell him that the people who should have loved me unconditionally had chosen to tear me down instead? I kissed his forehead gently. Because sometimes, I said softly, family hurts us instead of helping us. And when that happens, we have to protect ourselves. And I have to protect you. He nodded, his little hand clutching mine. "But you have Daddy. And me." Tears blurred my vision. "Yes," I whispered, "and that's all I need." That night, after he fell asleep, I sat in the quiet living room and realized something. Revenge wasn't in the article, or the tapes, or the shame my family now carried. The real revenge was the life I had built, the love I had created in spite of their cruelty. Every laugh with Philip, every bedtime story with R, every contract signed at the business I had built, those were victories louder than any tape recording. But still one final confrontation remained. not for them for me. So I drove to the house I once called home. It felt smaller than I remembered, worn at the edges, a shell of its former self. I knocked, and after a long pause, my mother opened the door. Her eyes were red, her face lined with exhaustion. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice brittle. "I came to say goodbye," I said simply. Her eyes narrowed. "Goodbye? After what you've done?" "No," I interrupted gently. "After what you've done. To me. To us. I've carried it long enough. I'm done." For a moment something flickered in her expression, regret maybe, or fear, but she said nothing. I turned and walked away, the cold air filling my lungs, my chest lighter than it had been in years. Walking away from that house, I didn't look back. For years, I had imagined this moment, the confrontation, the apology that never came, the impossible reconciliation. But in reality, there was no grand ending, no embrace, no sudden change of heart, just silence. And sometimes silence itself is the answer. As I drove home, I thought about the girl I had been at 17. The girl who sat at the kitchen table begging for a chance at college only to be told she was unworthy. The girl who cried herself to sleep while her sister wore new dresses, while her parents whispered words like defective and burden. I thought about how close she came to believing them, to letting their voices become her truth. And I wished I could reach back through time, take her hand and tell her, one day you will build a life that proves them wrong. One day, their cruelty will no longer define you. But I couldn't go back. What I could do was honor her now. By living. By loving. By refusing to carry shame that never belonged to me in the first place. In the weeks that followed, the noise from the article slowly faded. The whispers dulled, the messages stopped. My parents stayed silent, choosing exile over accountability. Julia moved out of the spotlight, her engagement broken, her reputation cracked. And me, I kept moving forward. I poured myself into my work, into my family, into moments that mattered. I found joy in the ordinary, the sound of ours laughter, as he built towers of blocks, the way Philip reached for my hand absent-mindedly. When we crossed the street, the warmth of coffee and the morning light. Small things, but they stitched my life together more strongly than any apology ever could. Still, there were nights when the ache returned, when I found myself staring at the shoebox of tapes and wondering if closure ever really existed. Trauma doesn't vanish, it lingers, it echoes. But over time, the echoes grew softer, drowned out by the life I was building. One evening, I sat with Philip on the porch, the sun setting in hues of orange and gold. I told him something I hadn't said out loud before. I used to think revenge meant making them hurt the way they hurt me. I thought exposing them, showing the world their cruelty, that was the victory. But now I see it's simpler. Revenge is living a life they said I could never have. It's smiling in spite of them. It's raising our son with love, the kind I never knew. That's the real triumph. Philip smiled, squeezing my hand. That's not revenge, Hazel. That's healing. Maybe he was right. Maybe the line between the two blurred until they became the same thing. Years later, when R grew older and began asking questions about family, I told him the truth, but gently. I told him sometimes the people who are supposed to love us unconditionally fail us. Sometimes they choose their own pride over compassion. But I also told him that family isn't just blood. Family is the people who show up, who believe in you, who nurture the parts of you others tried to destroy. And I promised him with every fiber of my being that I would always be that kind of family for him. Looking back now, I see that my parents' greatest betrayal wasn't refusing to pay for my college. It wasn't burning my textbooks or mocking me as defective. It was that they never cared to know me at all. They saw only what I lacked, never what I carried. They never asked who I was becoming. But maybe that's the lesson hidden in all of this. You don't need to be seen by those who refuse to look. You just need to keep building, keep rising until one day the life you've created is too undeniable to ignore. So if you're listening to me right now, if you've been made to feel small by the very people who should have lifted you up, hear me. You are not defective. You are not unworthy. You are not the sum of their blindness. You are the sum of your own courage, your own choices, your own refusal to give up. I survived their betrayal. I turned their rejection into resilience. And I built something they could never take from me, peace. So live loudly. Live fully. Let your life be the answer to every doubt, every insult, every door slammed in your face. Because at the end of the day, revenge healing, whatever you want to call it isn't about them. It's about you, and you are enough. If my story spoke to you, if it reminded you of your own journey, I'd love for you to share it. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Tell me about the truths you've carried, the battles you've fought, the moments you chose yourself over silence. Because together, our stories matter.